Today I have with me my dear friend Simon Knapp from Singapore. He's the creative genius behind our project SAS Tower and SAS Crown. Why did you choose Southeast Asia to progress your career?
Most of the population lives in Asia. So where things are created and where things are at fastest speed and experiments are still possible is here. Thought it was the place to be.
Architecture is the art of telling stories, right? How will you narrate when it comes to SAS Crown?
The narrative should be like living in the sky villas, and feeling that when you go home, you go to your individual safe haven up in the sky. No?
What sort of similarity do you see between Vastu and Feng Shui?
They are all exactly the same. It was a way to transmit knowledge about how to build, addressing the winds, the water currents, health issues, psychological issues, to take profit of the nature and to don't be exposed to the dangers of the nature.
An architect's dream is an engineer's nightmare. How do you balance that?
It gets almost balance on itself because architecture is not an individual exercise. The most complex machine that human builds are cities. And within cities, there are buildings, parks. So an architect can come here with some dream, but the reality is that it's not built for his imagination. It's built for a society.
So what was the most challenging part while designing SAS Crown? Hi everyone, this is Dr. Jayasurya from SAS Infra. Today I have with me my dear friend Simon Knapp from Singapore. He's the creative genius behind our projects SAS Tower and SAS Crown. Currently he is working as the managing partner with Enzyme APD, and formerly he was the director at SAS Singapore. He has worked across several iconic projects throughout the world, and currently he's reshaping Hyderabad. Hi Simon, welcome to Hyderabad.
Thank you for having me here.
How do you feel coming to Hyderabad?
I love coming here. I've been coming since 2018, and I really like the work atmosphere, the culture, the food, the party, and also the current, I think, historical moment of the city, developing so fast and with such a good vibes.
Can you share your journey as an architect?
I studied in Spain. I'm originally from Spain. So this Simon Knapp in reality is Núñez de Arenas Fraile, but I make it short to don't have to spell it. Make the people do strange noises and they try to pronounce the name. And then after my studies, I left Spain and I've been working internationally since the 99. I worked first in Brazil as a professor at the university, later in the Netherlands for 4 years with a very international firm called Meccano Architects. After that, I traveled in Southeast Asia for almost a year and a half. And then I went back to Spain to work as a freelance, finally to go to work in the Middle East. I worked for a while in the Middle East with a small, very boutique firm, which now is one of our partners in the Middle East, and also with AEDAS. This is around 2007. After AEDAS in Dubai, I moved to Thailand, where I was working in a design architectural firm called Orbit Design Studio, that are our partners now. And also I joined AEDAS Singapore after a few years living and working in Thailand. So in AEDAS Singapore, when this building was designed, I was the director and the country head for the whole Indian subcontinent. So during this 10 years period with AEDAS, I was the lead designer for Bharat Mandapan in Delhi, the whole Pragati Maidan master plan, and also the convention center. That was where it was hosted the G20 summit last September. And then also at this period, we started to work in Hyderabad. I met SAS Infra partners for the first time in Mumbai in a very informal dinner, and there is where we started this long-term relation that we have now. And I start to come to the city. First we designed the Tower, then SAS Crown, and we are still here. No? This is, if I try to make it short, this has been my path, very international from day one, and until 2 years ago, living in Asia. 2 years ago, I joined a very boutique firm that were friends called Enzyme APD, based on Hong Kong. And now I'm one of the partners and the managing director. So since then, my path has gone into more boutique services. It's not a large corporation. We are more selective. We are also more conscious about the relations. And we have 3 offices currently, one in Hong Kong, one in Singapore, and we have an office in Madrid that is expanding now into Portugal. So we are, I'm in the firm for the last 2 years, and since then we have been growing in India and in the Middle East quite a lot, also with some projects in Southeast Asia.
That's amazing. Why did you choose Southeast Asia to progress your career?
Well, initially, I always wanted to live in Asia. I was just very curious. And then also because I thought that where things happen in our time lives is in Asia, is where most of the people live, where the cities they are still growing, and everybody's young. And it's where I had the feeling that I wanted to be there, part of this growth as a society, not as my country society, but as a global society. So then I moved to Thailand in 2010, before in the Middle East, in Dubai and in Bahrain. And it was true. I mean, where things are happening is in Asia. Europe is very nice, it's very interesting, but the most of the population live in Asia. So where things are created and where things are at faster speed and experiments are still possible is here. So this was my main decision, to go to Asia to develop personally and professionally, because I thought it was the place to be, basically.
You know, India is known for ancient structures and a lot of heritage buildings.
Yes.
What do you think is India's contribution to world in terms of architecture?
Oh, wow, that is a big question. I mean, not only as architecturally, but as a civilization on itself. You cannot understand our world without India. So it's not... to isolate the architecture only will be kind of difficult, because it's much more than that. I mean, if you look back, the world has like 3 big civilizations in history, and India, of course, is one of them. So there is always an influence of one on each other, no? So, for example, it's clear that let's say Roman architecture has an influence in the whole Western world. India has an influence in the whole Asia. Buddhism is born here, and the Buddhist temples of Japan are like this because something was born here. So it's all related. Christianity has compassion because Buddha had compassion. So it's all a mix of cultural events that happen in history. And I would say in terms of architecture, maybe the temple architecture and the detailing of the stone carvings and everything that is in the handcraft of the facades, on the detailing of the jalis and the materiality of it, it has a large influence in the whole region, including the Middle East. For example, all the carving from the Middle East, I'm sure that is very strong influence from here. The Middle East influence architecture in Spain 1,000 years ago. So it's all a continuous exchange of information that has that still goes ahead. Now some ideas developed in Western countries are implemented here. Architectural vocabulary here has an influence in English, like bungalow. Bungalow is used in English, but the kind of architecture of the bungalow is used in many other parts of the world. Bungalow, Michael. Yeah, so I think it's yes, especially the detailing and the understanding of the geometry is very influential.
Architecture is the art of telling stories, right?
Yes, very much, yes.
How will you narrate when it comes to SAS Crown?
When we start the design, we were thinking about how is to live above the clouds in a city, in a region where nobody has lived above the clouds before. Only a human, no? Basically. So it was something very new. So we were thinking that the narrative should be like living in the sky villas, and this sense of feeling that when you go home, you go to your individual safe haven above the clouds or up in the sky, no? So this was one of the first things. This influenced also the sense of luxury. So when you arrive to your own floor. You have large spaces, you have natural cross ventilation, you have higher ceilings than usual, 4 meters, to get this sense of villa up in the sky. So this is one of the main narratives. This has an influence on the design of the facades, on the massing. So we have these frames that they look like little houses up in the sky as well. And in this sense, it was the original narrative. Then comes the layers of detailing of each one of the spaces, the sense of luxury, the amazing amenities that we have from the lower levels. But initially, the conceptualization was we need to transmit the feeling of you live in your own villa in the sky. So, yeah, and I think we managed to do it. When you enter here, it's like you are almost like a balloon in the sky, no? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you balance between functionality and aesthetics in a project like this?
The way it was designed, functionality can be reduced to a legal minimum. So you can do a house with the minimum legal dimensions, or that normally the regulation they define minimum corridor, minimum size of a bedroom, and this is the minimum functionality of a space, the efficiency of the spaces. But then once you go into aesthetics, aesthetic is not only the detailing of the materials, the textures, but it's also the spaces and how you experience those spaces. Of course, if you go to a minimum, the space will be only functional because you need it for living, is what you need for living. Once you go larger, you start talking about aesthetics, and aesthetics is also the quality of the space. A space is not only XYX, it's a set, it's also political, it's also luxury, it's also social. So once you go into wide open spaces like this, the balance is needs to be there. It still needs to be working properly, but there is this sense of luxury, which is what defines this balance. There is a point in luxury when if you overdone, it's not a home. It might be something like a public space, a palace, something else. So I think in this case, between spatial aesthetics, one functionality, including Vastu, it has a very good balance because the space is luxurious, but at the same time, it works perfectly. There is no wastage, there is no silly corners. It is working.
Simon, you have worked across so many countries and done a lot of projects.
Yes.
And most of your work has been in, if I'm not wrong, in China and
In
Southeast
Asia, East Asia and South Asia, yes.
Yeah, so these countries, they have the concept of feng shui and they
Yes.
place a lot of importance to it in terms of
Yes.
house planning and even the city planning, right?
Yes.
And in the past few years, you have been working in India.
Yes.
What sort of similarity do you see between Vastu and feng shui?
Actually, without entering into the particularities, the details of each one of them, in the end, they are all exactly the same. So it's an ancient body of knowledge about planning, about urban planning, about residential planning, which is around, for both, I think, 4,000 years old. And it was a way to transmit knowledge about how to build, addressing the winds, the water currents, health issues, psychological issues. So the things are located in the right place to take profit of the nature and to don't be exposed of the dangers of the nature. So in the case of Feng Shui and the case of Vastu, this is exactly the same. So now with the years, this has been transforming and adapting, but the base of both is exactly the same. Of course, you have always a layer of religion on top, a superstition that can be solved in a way or in another way. But the origin is wise knowledge, ancient knowledge about how to do architecture. For example, if in Vastu, you need to put always the master bedroom as a very solid component on the southwest. This is because the winds, they come from the southwest. In the most of India, they come from the sea. They go through, and you need to be freshly ventilated during the day and during the night in this point. And especially, you don't want to have the kitchen there because then you smoke the rest of the house, you smoke the central space, and then nobody can live there, basically. So it's so basic, but today we have universities to teach about the environmental issues. This was our ancient books about how to plan, respecting nature and profiting from nature, for both, for Vastu, for India, and for the Chinese civilization, the same.
So, what was the most challenging part while designing SAS Crown?
Initially, I thought that the understanding of Vastu planning was very challenging, but once you get to help and support for people that is from people that is very knowledgeable, this doesn't become an issue, because actually in Hyderabad is so clear how it needs to be that once you know the logic, it's doable. I think it was more challenging understanding what this building will add to the culture of the city. Because when you build something of this caliber, you're not doing just a building. You are doing architecture with capital A, and this is not only concrete, only something that you use and then you don't use. You are creating also culture. So a building like this now is a modern building, but in the future will be heritage of the future generations. Understanding that this is not only a tall structure but legacy will create culture. It was the most challenging thing, because for this we really needed to understand the city, the culture of Telangana, Hyderabad, the people that is going to live there, not only from a Vastu point of view, but also in the spatial sense. No? So the natural ventilation, the views that you are going to get, understanding the cultural tone of the tower was maybe the most challenging thing, not just the structure, or this is always the technical issue that can be solved, but the cultural tone was the most challenging one.
Have you implemented any element in the architecture which showcases the cultural undertones which we implemented?
Yes, very much. There is a lot of details. For example, each one of the tower has on the lower levels, they have a kind of more solid aspect than on the upper levels. So in the end, you have a canvas. It's a solid wall, very large, and each one of them will be with certain jalis. So this introduce on the lower level of the towers, where your perception, your daily perception is stronger, a pattern that has a very cultural meaning. So the jalis, they are a geometrical cultural expression that is imprinted on the towers on the lower scale. So this is something that makes the towers being very, very Indian. Even if they are very international, at the same time they are very local. So this global local exercise, it is what makes these towers special. They could be in any world capital, but at the same time they can be only here because of these details, the jalis, the materiality, the colors that they match the environment, the way that they are located to catch the winds in the three sides. This is the adaptation to the culture and to the environment. It makes it very local, and at the same time with the materials like glass outside and glass balustrades, curtain walls on the northeast corner where it doesn't get hot. It makes it at the same very international, very at the same trend that is happening in Singapore or in Hong Kong or New York. Is a purely global local structure.